No, thank you. My brother-in-law climbs trees for a living as an arborist and seems to have no issues with heights. He's very good at it. My youngest nieces and nephews also are very comfortable climbing trees, especially during family camping trips. Their parents are more laid back than I am. So the issue of how high they are allowed to go is something I have to deal with and sometimes need to avert my eyes. But they are having so much fun. Running and climbing are things kids do. But today's story, a grown man runs and climbs a tree. Zacchaeus. He has heard the buzz about Jesus and knows he's in town, but there's always a crowd traveling with him, and even more people gathering around him wherever he shows up anywhere. And that is a problem, because Zacchaeus is short in stature, and he cannot see Jesus because of the crowd. So he runs ahead on the road that Jesus is walking and climbs a sycamore tree to get a better look. I think that's unconventional behavior. I don't know. Who of you would do this? Maybe Reynold Friesen would do it if Bono was walking down the street. But he's kind of tall. He might not need to. I think it's a bit odd behavior. But Zacchaeus is curious and determined. When Jesus gets to the place where Zacchaeus is, he notices him. He stops. He looks up. He calls Zacchaeus by name. And then he urges him to come down quickly so that Zacchaeus can host Jesus in his home. Jesus seems to have no qualms about inviting himself over to someone's house for dinner. And Zacchaeus responds with enthusiasm, happy to have Jesus as a guest in his place. But of course, there's the crowd always opposing these crazy things that Jesus is doing. The cheater Zacchaeus does not deserve to have the good teacher in his home. Zacchaeus is not worthy of Jesus' attention, because Zacchaeus is a chief tax collector, high up in the ranks of a corrupt government system, a Jewish employee of Rome. And it was typical of tax collectors to rip people off, charging more than was fair and keeping the extra. The power structure enabled this practice and made Zacchaeus very, very wealthy. It also made him despised by his community. He's a traitor. He's a thief. His community believes he is beyond redemption. And this isn't the first time the crowd is scandalized by the associations Jesus makes with so-called sinners. There are many stories in the gospel writing that follows this pattern. Jesus regularly spends time with people on the margins who do not live in step with societal or religious expectations. And the crowd, and especially the religious leaders, do not know what to do with that. But Jesus clearly has not written Zacchaeus off and is quite keen on a visit to his home. In fact, Jesus is honoring Zacchaeus by inviting himself over, giving Zacchaeus the privilege of offering him hospitality. This encounter with Jesus moves Zacchaeus to make a grand announcement. He commits to giving away half his possessions to the poor and paying back 4 times as much money to anyone he's defrauded on their taxes. Having seen Jesus and having been seen by Jesus, Zacchaeus changes. He makes things right with his community, and he frees himself of the wealth that he has acquired unjustly. And I don't know, reading the story, it seems it only takes a moment. I don't know if this was growing in Zacchaeus, this conviction, but it seems in the story that it only takes a moment for him to turn from selfishness and greed and dishonesty to the Jesus way of serving others and being generous and living with integrity. He makes this commitment voluntarily without Jesus saying anything about it. It seems to be enough for Zacchaeus to simply be in Jesus' presence, to know the changes he needs to make. Well, Zacchaeus is a wonderful model for us this Lenten season, an example of someone who turns away from what is holding them back, holding them hostage, and turns to the freedom way of Jesus. Zacchaeus' determination to see Jesus, even if it means doing something a little bit odd and vulnerable, climbing a tree, is inspiring, as is his commitment to change, to making things right. This is a story of salvation. Zacchaeus is lost in his wealth and dishonesty until Jesus finds him and saves him from it. And after Zacchaeus makes his declaration, committing to do better, Jesus responds with this: "Today's salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." By calling him a son of Abraham, Jesus is blessing Zacchaeus, and Jesus is moving him from the margins to the center of his community. Just like last week's story of the Good Samaritan, where Carla showed us that Jesus turned the bad guy into the good guy, here again the villain becomes the model for the judgmental crowd. Zacchaeus' encounter with Jesus happens on the road as Jesus is passing through Jericho to Jerusalem, and Jesus knows he's traveling to his death, and this is only a stop along the way. But it's an important stop because it illustrates exactly why Jesus has come, to seek and to save the lost. Jesus hasn't come for people who deserve him, but for people who need him, which we know isn't only Zacchaeus, but it's the crowd as well, and it's us as well. We may think we're not lost because we already know Jesus and we have faith in him, but as our story seems to show us, there are many ways to be lost. Zacchaeus is lost in his money and his unethical way of acquiring it. He needs to be saved from that. And for that to happen, he needs to see Jesus. He knows that Jesus is someone special, or else he wouldn't have gone to all that trouble to see him. And it's worth it, because when Jesus looks up and sees him, everything changes. Seeing Jesus and being seen by Jesus is salvation. And if we are sensitive and open like Zacchaeus, salvation inevitably means change. Sometimes really big change, sometimes a total life overhaul, particularly if we find ourselves far from the good way. Zacchaeus' conversion is not about saying the right prayer. It's about the presence and the way of Jesus